Okay, so imagine this. You're a broke teenager, your crush doesn't know you exist, you live with your elderly aunt and uncle who still think flip phones are cutting-edge technology, and then one day, a radioactive spider bites you, and suddenly you can stick to walls, lift cars, and have a built-in danger alarm in your brain. Sounds like a fever dream, right? But here's the thing nobody tells you about Spider-Man. He's not just some guy in spandex swinging between buildings for fun. He's actually the result of one of the most desperate creative decisions in comic book history. And the reason he exists at all is because everyone thought the idea was absolutely terrible. Stay with me, because this gets wild. So who is Spider-Man? Like, really? Because if you think you know, you probably don't know the half of it. Spider-Man is Peter Parker, a high school kid from Queens, New York, who got superpowers from the worst workplace safety violation in history. But before we get into the radioactive spider situation, we need to talk about why this character even exists. Because the origin story behind the origin story is honestly more entertaining than most Marvel movies. It's 1962. Stan Lee is sitting in his office at Marvel Comics, and he's tired. Not just, I need coffee tired. He's creatively exhausted. He's been writing the same types of stories for years. Perfect heroes, boring villains, rinse and repeat. Superman is dominating the market, and everyone's trying to copy that formula. You know, the whole flawless alien demigod who never makes mistakes thing. And then Stan has what might be the worst idea anyone's ever had in a board meeting. He wants to create a teenage superhero, not a teenage sidekick, an actual teenage main character with acne and money problems and social anxiety. Oh, and he should be named after an insect that most people are terrified of. His publisher, Martin Goodman, literally told him this idea would kill the company. But here's where it gets interesting. Stan Lee didn't just ignore his boss. He snuck Spider-Man into a comic that was about to be canceled anyway. It was called Amazing Fantasy number 15, and it was basically the comic book equivalent of a show getting moved to Friday night before cancellation. Nobody was watching, nobody cared. So Stan figured, what do I have to lose? Let's try the Spider Kid. He brought in artist Steve Ditko, who had this incredibly weird, creepy art style that nobody else was doing at the time. While everyone else was drawing square-jawed heroes who looked like they exclusively ate protein powder, Ditko was drawing these angular, almost unsettling figures, perfect for a kid with spider powers, right? They created Peter Parker. Skinny, nerdy, glasses. The kind of kid who gets shoved into lockers, not the kind who saves the world. And then they did something revolutionary. They made him fail. See, here's what makes Spider-Man different from literally every other superhero that existed at the time. When Peter Parker first gets his powers, he doesn't immediately decide to fight crime. He doesn't have some noble awakening. He doesn't hear violins playing in the background while he stares at the sunset thinking about justice. No, he decides to make money. He becomes a performer. He's on TV. He's got merchandise. He's living his best life. And honestly, you can't blame the kid. He's 15 years old, he's been poor his whole life, and suddenly he can do things nobody else can do. Of course he's gonna cash in. But then comes the moment that defines Spider-Man forever. And if you know it hits different. Peter's walking out of a TV studio after a performance, feeling great, probably thinking about what he's gonna buy with his first real paycheck. A thief runs past him, and a security guard yells at Peter to stop the guy. Peter, in peak teenage apathy, just lets him go. He literally stands there and watches. The guard is furious, but Peter doesn't care. He says something like, "Not my problem, buddy." And here's where Stan Lee and Steve Ditko did something that would change superhero comics forever. That thief, the one Peter let escape because he couldn't be bothered, he goes to Peter's neighborhood, he breaks into a house, and he kills Uncle Ben. When Peter finds out, when he tracks down this criminal and realizes it's the same guy he could have stopped, the guilt doesn't just hit him, it destroys him. This is a kid who has to live with the knowledge that his own uncle died because Peter was too selfish, too wrapped up in his own success to do the right thing when it mattered. And this is when we get the most famous line in comic book history. With great power comes great responsibility. Except here's something wild. Uncle Ben never actually says this line in the original comic. It's just the narrator. It's Stan Lee speaking directly to the reader, telling us what Peter Parker learned that night. The lesson isn't given to Peter by some wise mentor. He has to learn it through the worst tragedy of his life. That's dark. That's not Superman getting a pep talk from his space dad. That's a kid whose mistake got someone killed, and now he has to live with that forever. But let's talk about what makes Peter Parker actually Spider-Man, because the powers are honestly insane when you think about them. The radioactive spider bite gives him proportional spider strength, meaning he can lift roughly 10 tons. That's about as much as a full school bus. But he's not built like the Hulk. He's still this skinny teenager, which means all that force is concentrated in a normal-sized body. Imagine arm wrestling someone who looks like they weigh 150 pounds and they casually flip a car over with one hand. He can stick to walls through these microscopic setae, tiny hair-like structures on his hands and feet that create molecular adhesion. It's the same way real spiders climb, except Peter can somehow turn it on and off at will, which science absolutely cannot explain, but we're going to ignore that because it's comics. Then there's the spider sense, which might be his most overpowered ability. It's basically precognition for danger. His brain gets a split-second warning before something bad happens, which means he's almost impossible to surprise. You cannot sneak up on this guy. He knows you're there before you know you're there. Oh, and the web shooters? Those aren't biological. Peter makes those himself. He's such a genius that he invents a synthetic polymer stronger than steel cable, designs mechanical web shooters that fit on his wrists, and figures out dozens of web formulas for different situations, all while in high school. Let me repeat that. Peter Parker invented web shooters in his bedroom as a teenager. This kid should be a billionaire just from the patent alone. Now here's where Spider-Man gets really interesting as a character, and why he's not just another superhero punching bad guys. Peter Parker is broke, like constantly, perpetually, devastatingly broke. He can save the entire city, stop alien invasions, fight alongside the Avengers, and then he can't make rent. He's selling photos of himself as Spider-Man to a newspaper run by a guy who actively hates Spider-Man. His boss, J. Jonah Jameson, is literally paying Peter to help him print propaganda against his own superhero identity. The irony is so thick you could cut it with a web shooter. And Peter can't tell anyone. He can't explain why he's always late, why he's always tired, why he has these weird bruises and injuries. His relationships fall apart because he's keeping this massive secret. His grades suffer, his aunt worries about him constantly, his friends think he's flaky and unreliable. Being Spider-Man ruins Peter Parker's life over and over again. Most superheroes have a secret identity as a fun side thing. Bruce Wayne is still rich. Tony Stark doesn't hide who he is at all. Clark Kent has a stable job and a normal life. But Peter sacrifices everything to be Spider-Man, and he gets almost nothing in return except the knowledge that he's doing the right thing. And this is why Spider-Man became the most popular superhero in the world. Remember how everyone thought the idea would fail? How Martin Goodman said teenagers couldn't be main characters? How naming him after a spider was commercial suicide? Amazing Fantasy number 15 came out in August 1962. It sold out immediately. The fan mail was overwhelming. Kids were writing in saying they'd never seen a hero who felt like them before. Not perfect, not invincible, not some untouchable god from another planet. Just a kid trying his best and failing a lot. By 1963, Spider-Man had his own series. By 1967, he had a TV show. By the 1970s, he was Marvel's flagship character. And now, he's a multi-billion-dollar franchise with movies, games, merchandise everywhere, and multiple actors playing him across different universes. All because Stan Lee snuck a terrible idea into a canceled comic book. But here's the really beautiful thing about Spider-Man and why the character has lasted over 60 years. Peter Parker never stops being Peter Parker, even when he's fighting God-level threats, even when he's swinging between skyscrapers, even when he's saving the world. He's still that kid from Queens who makes jokes when he's nervous, who worries about his aunt, who can't afford to fix his costume when it gets torn. So, what does Spider-Man actually do? On the surface, he fights crime in New York, he stops bank robberies, tackles supervillains, prevents disasters, the usual superhero stuff. But what he really does, what makes him Spider-Man and not just another guy in a costume, is he never gives up on people. He saves everyone, the criminals, the bystanders, even the villains sometimes. He talks to people while he's fighting them. He makes jokes to diffuse tension, to make scared people feel safer, to remind everyone, including himself, that there's still hope, even in the worst situations. There's this famous comic panel where Spider-Man is trapped under tons of rubble, and he's thinking about giving up. His body is broken, he's out of web fluid, nobody's coming to help. And then he remembers Uncle Ben. He remembers Aunt May. He remembers everyone counting on him. And he lifts. He lifts tons of steel and concrete through pure willpower, crawls out half dead, and keeps going. That's Spider-Man. That's what he does. He keeps going when anyone else would quit, not because he's the strongest or the fastest or the smartest, but because someone has to, and it might as well be him. So who is Spider-Man? He's a kid who made a mistake, learned from it, and decided to spend the rest of his life making sure nobody else suffers because of his failures. He's proof that you don't need to be perfect to be a hero. You just need to care enough to try. He's the most human superhero ever created, which is weird considering he's named after an arachnid and can stick to walls. And he exists because someone had a terrible idea and did it anyway. Kind of inspiring when you think about it. Your move, Superman.